Welcome, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. I'm Jillian Ryan. I'm the Senior Manager of Content Marketing Strategy at Intuit Mailchimp, and I'll be your moderator for today's session, The Art of the Opt-in, the New Rules of Email and SMS Growth, Trust, and Engagement. As marketing professionals, we've gotten really good at growing our lists. And in fact, our research finds that most email and SMS lists are growing at a fast pace. But there is a real challenge here. The engagement from your consumers and your audience is just not keeping up. So today, we're going to take a closer look at one of the most used tools in our marketing toolbox, and that is the opt-in. And we're going to look at how it's evolving. And more importantly, we're going to share practical, real-world ways to turn that first sign-up into a high-performing subscriber relationship. Now, to better understand what's working right now, we partnered with research firm Ascend2 to gather data and insights, not only on how brands are building their lists, but also what keeps subscribers engaged once they join. Now, a few little housekeeping things to discuss. This session will be available on demand for you to rewatch. And if you're interested in diving into the specific findings of the research, check out the Docs tab in Goldcast. You can download the full report. We have some regional insights for you there as well. And lastly, we want this to be interactive. We want to hear from you. There is a Q&A tab in Goldcast. Any question that you have during the presentation, submit them there. We're going to save time at the end of our time together today, and we're going to do a live Q&A with our two experts. And speaking of those experts, I'd like to introduce our speakers for today's session. So first up, we have Todd Lebo. He is the CEO of Ascend2, which is an independent research firm that helps companies like Intuit Mailchimp and other B2B and consumer brands turn original data into actionable insights. Todd has a ton of experience leading these types of research studies across marketing and data and customer experience, and he is always translating the research into practical guidance for marketers like you. Todd, really happy to have you here. Thanks so much for joining.
Thank you.
And then we also have my colleague, Savannah Williamson, who is a Senior Customer Success Program Manager here at Intuit Mailchimp. Savannah really leads growth and retention initiatives that help our customers scale and be smarter. She joined Mailchimp through the acquisition of a pop-up technology platform that we're so excited to have within our organization called amp.io. And when she was there, she partnered with leading e-commerce brands to drive list growth and revenue. So she's well credentialed today. She has over 15 years of experience in e-commerce and marketing, and she's worked both within D2C brands and alongside them. So she's really well-rounded and has a great perspective. Thank you, Savannah, for being here.
Super excited for today's conversation.
Yeah, it's going to be a good one. And with that, I'm going to step out of the limelight and let Todd take it away and ground us a little bit into the research and the methodology that is going to anchor our conversation. Take it away, Todd.
Oh, thank you. Absolutely looking forward to this session. This study was based on a survey of over 6,000 consumers and 2,000 marketers across the US, Canada, the UK, and Australia, New Zealand. We fielded it back in October and November of 2025. So it's all very recent research. And what makes it especially valuable is that we were looking at both sides of the equation. We were looking at what marketers are doing to grow their email and SMS list, and at the same time, how consumers are actually responding to those efforts. And when we compared those two perspectives side by side, that's where we got some really important gaps that emerged, and we want to talk about those today. First, we found that we're winning access, but we're losing attention. So let's really pause and think about that for a second, because that's really a big shift. We found that marketers are growing their list faster than ever. 85% of email lists are growing, and over 80% of SMS lists are growing. So that's good. So on the surface, it looks like it's very successful. And maybe we should just end this webinar now, because I'm sure we're all very busy and have busy schedules. But we found, as we looked at the data, that's not the entire story. Yeah, there's a lot more to the story. While lists are growing for brands, consumers are having a different experience. 71% of consumers say that they're receiving more messages, but only about 40% say they're paying more attention. The majority say their attention is either flat or actually declining. So the work we're putting into growing our list falls flat if fewer are paying attention.
Yeah, that's so true. I think what we're seeing is it's actually easier than ever to really grow a list, but it's harder to keep people engaged once they're on it. And a lot of that comes down to expectations. So if someone signs up and immediately starts getting messages that don't really feel relevant to them or come too often, you're going to lose them pretty quickly. So it's not just about getting the opt-in anymore. It's about setting up a relationship in a way that keeps people engaged over time.
Yeah, that's really a good way to frame it, Savannah. This really isn't about list growth or the volume of new subscribers you can add to your list. It's about establishing a long-term relationship with your audience. So if attention is the challenge, what does strong performance actually look like? When we look at conversion rates, most brands are clustered in the middle. But that there's this small group, we found about 8% that are converting at over 20% rate. In the report, we've referred to this group as top converters, and we analyzed how they achieve this success. And what stands out is they're not doing more. They're doing more things more intentionally. They're doing things more intentionally, especially at the opt-in stage. So Savannah, when you think about high-performing programs, what's different in their approach?
That's a great question. I think the biggest difference is that the experience feels more natural. So the opt-in is aligned to what the customer is already doing, doesn't feel forced or out of place. So instead of interrupting the experience, it feels like a logical next step.
Yeah, that is an excellent point, Savannah. One thing that really is important to understand is what happens before somebody converts. And in this chart, it really helps show that. So how do consumers find brands so that there is an opportunity to opt in? We see that social ecosystems play a central role in discovery and lead capture. 65% of brands use organic social and 61% use paid social to drive people to their email and SMS programs. And then you also have search-driven and owned channels. 55% use paid search and 51% use a website or blog content. So when you step back, this suggests that multiple touch points across different channels are needed to drive audience opt-in. So it's less of a single moment and more of a sequence of interactions. So a consumer's winding story to opt in may look like this. They discover your brand on social, perform research about you on search, engage your website, and then eventually decide to opt in. And that's just one example. Savannah, how should marketers think about that from a practical standpoint?
Yeah, I think the key takeaway is that your opt-in strategy has to really reflect how people are discovering you. So if someone's coming from social, that experience needs to feel connected to it. And then if they're browsing your site, that's a completely different opportunity and you need to treat it differently. So those unique interactions really influence how you start the opt-in process with an individual.
Yeah, and that's really the next question that we have. What is the right moment to ask? There's also fundamental tension that starts happening in that opt-in moment. Marketers want to grow their list, so we want to ask for more data and more opportunities to communicate with customers. But consumers want less friction. They want more relevancy and they want more control. And the opt-in is where really that tension first shows up. That's where conversion is won or lost and where trust is either built or broken. One data point that highlighted this tension is around data collection. Marketers need data. It's essential for personalization and a better user experience. but brands often ask for more data than consumers are willing to provide, creating unnecessary friction at that exact moment they're trying to drive signups. Nearly all pop-ups request an email address, 83%, and most also ask for a first name and phone number, and that's a lot of data to ask for at one time. Meanwhile, consumers, they're only willing to fill out at most 2 fields. 71% of consumers prefer actually 1 to 2 fields. So the question is for marketers, how do you balance that need for data with a consumer's willingness to share it?
Yeah, I think the key is just realizing that you don't have to get everything all at once. So many brands really try to collect way too much information way too early. But if you think of it as a start of a relationship, you can spread that out over time. So you're trying to earn the next step, not capture everything right up front.
Yeah, so that tension we're talking about, let's talk about one of the more important visible examples of that, and that's pop-ups. And wow, we found out that marketers have strong opinions about pop-ups. Rarely do we get overwhelming agreement with a survey question, but in this case, we did. 96% of marketers say that pop-ups are effective, and nearly half say they're very effective. Pop-ups are one of the most consistently effective ways to drive opt-ins. So, Savannah, the million-dollar question is, what makes pop-ups so effective?
Yeah, the effectiveness of a pop-up really comes down to relevance. A pop-up that shows immediately before someone has even had a chance to engage with your site can be easy to kind of ignore or close because there's no context yet. The person hasn't built any level of interest or trust with your brand. So at that point, you're asking for something before you've really given them a reason to say yes. But one thing I do want to clarify, because I think there's a common misconception around timing, it's that those immediate pop-ups are not always bad. It really comes down to the relevance again. So if a pop-up appears right away, but it's clear, concise, and aligned with what the customer expects, it can absolutely work. But if it shows up immediately and, like I was saying before, asks for too much information or doesn't clearly communicate that value, that's where you're going to start to lose people. So instead of thinking strictly about when it appears, think about how relevant it is in that moment. What we found work much better is aligning your pop-up to intent. So instead of thinking, when should this appear? You're really asking, what has this person done so far? And what does that tell me about their intent? So for example, if someone just landed on your site, their intent is still a little bit low, probably not the best moment to ask for commitment or a lot of personal information. But if they've browsed a few pages or spent some time on a product page, now you're starting to see that interest. And that's a much better time to kind of introduce an incentive or invite them to subscribe. So in each of those moments, the value needs to match the situation. Early on, it might be something light, content or updates. Later, it could be something a little bit more tangible, like a discount or exclusive access. So the pop-up really isn't just a format, it's a response, responding to what the customer is already doing. And the goal isn't just to show a pop-up, it's to show the right pop-up at the right moment, delivering the right value.
I love that. And that alignment between behavior, timing, and value is exactly what we see separating top performers from everyone else. And that really brings us up to the next important topic from the report, which is trust. Trust is the backbone of email and SMS list growth, but it must be earned. Brands overwhelmingly recognize that trust fuels email and SMS signups. 94% say that's important, and over half describe it as extremely important. Consumers confirm this through their need for clear, apparent trust signals from brands before opting in. Only about 31% of consumers assume brands will handle their data responsibly. So what builds trust are what we call visual signals, things like reviews, secure site indicators, and a clear privacy message. One way to think about your relationship with a consumer is that it's an exchange of value. Anytime you ask for information, the consumer asks what do I get in return? So if you ask for data like their birthday, you should be very clear how that benefits them. How we ask also matters. For example, if you say, share your birthday so I can send you something special, now it feels like a benefit, not a data request. So think of that a value exchange as a math equation. Your ask should not exceed the value the consumer is receiving. But now we need to make this practical by asking, what does that look like on my forms and pop-ups?
I think clarity is one of the biggest opportunities here. So many forms are vague and don't clearly explain what someone is signing up for. And your pop up should really match your brand. You put so much thought and effort into building your brand on your website. Don't let your pop up be an afterthought. Our templates in Mailchimp allow you to fully match your brand with fonts, colors, imagery, even down to the button styles to become one with your website. And we also include things like your logo and setting an opacity to the background so that users can still see your website behind it. And that's that trust signal that it's something that they can interact with. So design and being really clear about what they'll receive, how often, and why it's valuable to them can make a big difference.
I learned early on in my career the statement clarity trumps persuasion. You build trust with a clear offer so that an individual understands what they're signing up for. So for example, will it be easy to unsubscribe? Why do I need the information you're asking for? How will you use that information? Is how you are using that information of benefit to me? And how frequently will you email me? Spending time to make your offer clear is extremely valuable. And that leads us to our next opt-in discussion, timing. We found that timing is another major gap in opt-in strategy. Consumers are more likely to opt in during the checkout process or after completing a purchase. But those aren't the only opportunities. Consumers may also be open to opting in at an event, through a social media interaction, while engaged with your blog or content experience, and in other moments tied to interest or value. The challenge, most brands rely on static forms or immediate pop-ups that are trigger-based on page load, not intent. And as a result, they miss these key opportunities to capture opt-ins when consumers are actually ready. The bottom line is that brands often ask at times that are convenient for them rather than at moments that are meaningful to the consumer. So, Savannah, how should marketers rethink that?
Yeah, instead of thinking about one moment to ask, you can start to think about it as multiple moments across the journey. So, for example, early on, it might be a newsletter or content offer. After browsing, it could be a discount or incentive. Closer to that purchase, it might be SMS for updates or exclusive offers. And then at exit, you have one final opportunity. So instead of relying on a single ask, you're layering in those opportunities across the journey. And if you want to take this even a step further, you can start layering in more advanced strategies like different pop-ups based on traffic source or behavior. There's many interesting options that you can start to consider there. And when it comes to execution, simplicity really matters. So clear value, minimal fields, and a strong call to action. And most importantly, making sure that it aligns with where the customer is in their journey.
That's great insight on pop-up best practices. And it really brings up the topic of the subscriber life cycle. And this is where the conversation really shifts from acquisition to retention. As marketers, we find adding new subscribers to our list fun and exciting, but we often overlook or undervalue retention. But ultimately, having a long, healthy relationship with your subscribers reduces churn and allows your list to grow, truly grow, rather than just staying flat or experience only minimal growth. So when you look at what actually keeps people subscribed, two things really stand out. 56% say they stay subscribed when they're receiving valuable content or offers. And 40% point to getting messages at a reasonable frequency. So it's not just about getting the opt-in, it's about delivering consistent value at the right cadence over time. And when you start thinking about your list that way, it really changes how you approach growth. Savannah, we're now keeping subscribers important. I'm sorry, Savannah, we know keeping subscribers is important. How do we translate that into a life cycle strategy that can be put to practice?
Yeah, I think of this in three parts: how you grow, how you engage, and then how do you build over time. So, this is where we really start to shift how we think about the opt in experience. And instead of treating it as a single all or nothing moment where you try to collect everything up front, you start to think about how to make that first interaction easier to say yes to. And one of the ways that we see brands doing this really effectively is through multi step experiences. So even with that initial opt in moment, you're not asking for everything all at once, you're breaking it up into smaller steps. And we often refer to these as micro commitments. Instead of asking for one big commitment up front, you're asking a series of small, low friction steps. And there's a behavioral component to all of this. Once someone takes that first small step, saying yes, clicking a button and answering a simple question, they're much more likely to continue on in the journey of that pop-up because people naturally want to stay consistent with the actions that they've already taken. So instead of asking for email, phone number, preferences all at once, you might structure it like this. Step one, a simple question or selection. Step two, email. Step three, phone number or any additional details if it makes sense. And then each step feels really manageable rather than overwhelming. And what's important is that this doesn't replace the life cycle approach we talked about earlier. It really strengthens it because you're making that first interaction easier, which sets you up to build that relationship over time.
I totally agree. And that's exactly what we see in the research. When brands reduce friction early, even within that first interaction, they increase the likelihood of a deeper engagement later. Your insight into the micro commitment takes me back to my time doing optimization training for a research firm. We called it micro yes methodology. Instead of asking for one big commitment up front, you're guiding people through a series of small, easy yes decisions.
Yeah, so the mindset shift here is don't think of the opt in as one big ask. Break it into smaller steps, earn that initial engagement, and then build the relationship on from there.
Great point. All right, let's shift into what marketers can actually go do with this. Uh, it's always helpful to figure out how to translate theory into practice. So, Savannah, where should marketers start?
Yeah, I'd start with one of the most important shifts that we've talked about today, growing your list without increasing fatigue. What we see a lot of brands doing is equating growth with volume, more subscribers, more sends, more campaigns, but that's not what drives performance anymore. What drives performance is relevance. So instead of asking, how do we send more? The better question is, how do we make each message more valuable?
Yeah, and this is really where that attention gap shows up because when relevancy goes up, attention follows. And when volume goes up without relevancy, that's where that engagement drops.
Yeah, so if there's one thing to take away here, don't just grow your list, grow the value of your communication. And one thing that I would add here, and this is something that we see all the time, you can't just set your pop-up up and then forget about it. Many brands will launch one version and kind of leave it running for months. And over time, performance starts to decline. So just like you would test your A/B test your subject lines or your ad copy, you should be testing your pop-up as well. You can test different offers, messaging, layouts, because your pop-up is really just step one to that funnel. And if that's not optimized, everything that follows after that is affected.
Yes, and a quick note on friction. You can't avoid it. We have to ask the right information. We have to ask for more information, but you can do it smartly with relevancy and proper timing. The data shows that top converters are more willing to ask for personal details and preferences than other brands. Example, 46% asked for birthdays versus 30% for the non-top converters. So they're asking for very specific information. So strategically, friction can act almost as a quality filter, while volume might dip. Asking for one high quality value preference, such as interest, can result in a higher quality list, and that's your goal.
Yeah, excellent point. And an example of how this would work. So, say you're a beauty brand and you ask the customer in your pop up, what's your skin type? That feels personalized, it feels helpful. And then in your welcome automation, you can segment out by all of those skin types and include something like our best sellers for dry skin, which they just told you that they have.
And that's really a great example. But you mentioned automation as part of that process. What does that look like?
This is where, those behavior-based flows really come into play. And the good news is that you don't have to build a complex system to get started. You can kind of focus on three key automation flows that make a really big impact. First being your welcome flow. That's like your first impression, really sets expectations and builds early trust. Second being the re-engagement. We know not everyone will stay active, and that's okay, but you really need to have that strategy of bringing people back, and that can recover a lot of value for you. Third is those nurture campaigns. So a nurture campaign may provide subscribers with that educational content, testimonials, case studies, how-to videos. Each connection with the subscriber should provide value, and that will continue to build that trust. And the common thread across all of these is you're responding to behavior, not just following a marketing schedule.
Yeah, and that's where we see a big difference in performance. And this is a really cool stat. High quality list programs are about 3 times more likely to be fully automated.
Yeah, so I always tell customers instead of thinking about campaigns first, start with flows and use automation. That's where consistency and relevance really come together. And also earlier when we talked about pop-up forms, when using those, you want to always pair that with an automated welcome message, and not including one can be a really big mistake.
All right. Well, we don't want to make a big mistake, do we? So, all right. Well, our final discussion is about measurement, because this is another area where we saw some interesting gaps. What stood out here is that there's nearly half of marketers are using list size as a success metrics, which means, and that makes sense because it's easy to measure. But when you look at metrics like revenue and conversion, that drops off to about a third that are using that as a success metric. So we're seeing that focus. They're not focusing on growth metrics. They're focusing on growth metrics and less on performance metrics. And Savannah, from your experience, how should marketers start rethinking that?
I would move the thought process there from quantity to quality. So instead of just asking how big is our list, you want to start to ask yourself, how valuable is our list? So that means looking at things like the engagement over time, how much revenue is coming to your business from your list, and signals like unsubscribes or fatigue. So if you start seeing unsubscribes increasing, that's a signal. If engagement is dropping, that's another signal. And those signals tell you if your strategy is actually working.
Yeah, so when you connect those metrics back to your opt-in experience, that's where you start to see what's working. And attribution matters. 62% of the top converters have high attribution confidence compared to just 31% for all others. So this provides that visibility into the data directly correlates with high conversion rates.
Yeah, so digging deeper into your data is truly a game changer. Growth tells you that you're adding names to your list, but performance really tells you that you're building that value.
All right. I'll wrap this up with just a few takeaways from today, and then we'll go to the Q&A session. So if you have any questions, please ask them now. But here's 4 quick takeaways from our conversation today. First, the opt-in is the start of the relationship, not the end. Everything that happens after matters just as much. Second, trust, timing, and life cycle matter more than volume. It's not about doing more, it's about doing the right things at the right time. Third, high performance programs ask smarter, not more. They're reducing friction early and they build over time. And finally, small changes here can have a big downstream impact. Even simple adjustments to timing, messaging, or form design can significantly improve performance. And hopefully, you're walking away with a few ideas you're thinking, we should try that. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jillian to begin our Q&A.
Thank you so much, Todd, and thank you so much, Savannah. What a insightful session. I would like to invite everybody who's here live, please put your questions in the Q&A tab. You really have a great amount of expertise that can walk you through any questions you have about opt-ins, pop-ups, etc. In the meantime, I'm going to jump into some questions that we already have here. Savannah, I'm going to throw this first one to you. What types of website pop-ups can be put on, and how do I actually get them on the site?
Yeah, so our pop-ups can go on any website. It's just a matter of how you're going to actually connect that to Mailchimp. So easy route is through Shopify. If you are a Shopify connected store, our pop-ups will automatically work once you connect your Shopify store to Mailchimp. Any other website, and I'm talking any other one, it's as simple as installing a little bit of code into the head tag of your website, which if you're looking at me like, what is a head tag? Anyone on your web team knows exactly what that is. You just give them that code, they put it in there, and then you are off to the races to publish as many pop-ups as you would like on that website.
Amazing. And speaking of those pop-ups, Savannah, I'm going to throw this one to you as well. We want to pick your technical brain. Like, so you put the pop-up on the website, you cross that hurdle. Does it slow down your website? Any other like things that marketers should be thinking about in terms of what the pop-up might do to the website?
Yeah, that's a common misconception there that, oh, this is going to add to the load time of my site, or this is going to interfere with my site performance. And that's actually not the case, at least for Mailchimp's pop-ups, what I can speak to. They're really low lift to your site, and we actually don't even load in until the entire website has loaded itself. So your website is priority. We're going to let that load completely in, and then our script will load in after that to deliver that pop-up. So there's really no chance of getting trapped, as you would say, where the site hasn't even loaded and all of a sudden you're seeing this pop up. We take care of that and understand that customer experience on your website is number one.
Yeah, that's so great. We actually have another question coming. This is coming in live. Savannah, this is also related to the product, so going to throw it to you, keeping you on the hot seat. Can I tag subscribers who sign up through a specific pop-up? How does that work?
Yeah, that's a great strategy to leverage because tags are kind of your internal file folders in Mailchimp, right? So if you want to know someone who opted into your exit intent pop-up, throw a tag on them. If you want to tag all subscribers who come through your pop-up as just pop-up subscriber, it's a great way for you to know too. So definitely you can tag those subscribers who sign up through a pop-up form.
Amazing. I'm going to give you a break, Savannah. We have a question coming in here asking specifically about something that Todd, you mentioned during the presentation of the research, talking about attribution confidence and what is it and how we define it. And I know that was a big part of our methodology, right? So we asked a question about attribution confidence and then cut down the survey respondents. Can you talk a little bit more about how we got that stat for this research?
Yes. So we asked a question asking the level of confidence they had in their attribution. So they had multiple options for that. And then we took the people who had the highest confidence in their attribution and looked to see what they did differently. So we could cross tab all the responses to see what they're doing different from others. So, people who had extremely high confidence in their attribution, we looked at them to see how they performed and what they were doing differently than all the other people.
Awesome. Hopefully that answers the question. Appreciate that, Todd. We have another question coming in, and this one is a little bit long, and I love it because it's a really, really specific use case. We love getting questions like this. I'm going to try to summarize and put this. Savannah, I think you could definitely jump in, but Todd, of course, if you have any insights from the research, we'd love to hear your perspective. So this question is coming in from a business that is a music class, essentially. It's an early childhood music education company. And there are a lot of families that are on this email list, but they haven't really attended a class in the last couple of years. And now this person is asking about segmentation. So how should they be thinking about segmentation in terms of like continuing to engage with this audience that hasn't engaged very often? And specifically, they're coming out with some picture books soon. So expanding the scope of their business, right, into like a new product. And they want to engage with those people, but not sure if they'll be interested. So a lot of nuance there, Savannah, but I'm sure you have some expertise to share.
Yeah, we can kind of break that up into some digestible pieces there, right? So you've got this group of customers on your list who are fairly unengaged. I would definitely recommend doing some sort of like a win back engagement flow there. I think we mentioned that earlier. So targeting just that specific segment of customers who you see low engagement from and try and win them back. A great way to win them back would be just what you said. We're launching picture books soon. So being able to try and win them back while also saying, hey, we have something new that you probably haven't heard about before is a great way to kind of pair those two strategies together. I think a really important thing with win back strategies, though, is to make sure that once you kind of get the results from that, and if you still have customers who are unengaged, just make sure that we tag them or segment them out, because continuing to send to that unengaged audience is only going to impact your opens, clicks, etc. We want to be sending to those highly engaged contacts.
Yes, because that can impact your deliverability, right? Like that's a whole other side of it. Todd, I didn't mean to cut you off. Please go for it.
No, I was just saying, I think it's a great idea of looking at your list at the different segmentations that you can build, and once you re-engage them, then you should also have them going into like a new flow. So new automation, so that, now they've put their hand up, that they have an interest in this new product line, and now you have a place for them to go as they get more engaged with you.
Yeah, such a great insight. Questions are flowing. We have more. This one is definitely for you, Savannah. How do I balance pop-up frequency without annoying my visitors? A very good question. We talked about that today.
Yeah. Good thing is that with Insider pop-ups, we have some rules and guidelines to make sure that we're not showing multiple pop-ups on top of each other or back to back. So want to make sure that, again, customers' experience on your website is number one. But you can still layer it in through strategies, right? So if you have an entrance pop-up, we show that. Then you can have an exit intent pop-up, and that's only going to show if they take that action of leaving your website. And then other things, like I mentioned, around traffic source. So maybe we have one that's specific to customers coming from your social media ads. Then we're going to make sure that they're not showing any of the other ones that you have on site. So you can have multiple pop-ups and you can have them fire frequently without that annoyance. It's just taking that step back of, let me plan out this strategy the most effective way.
Yeah, I love that. And then all of that it will allow you to A/B test and learn, right? You'll have more metrics on what's working, what's not working. Todd, go for it.
I was also going to say, when you also hopefully download the research study, we surveyed marketers and consumers. So there's some information there on preferences that consumers have, that you can look at that and start to build your strategy based on, what consumers like or don't like about pop-ups, and how you can strategically implement your pop-ups in a way that's not going to alienate people.
Precisely. We have another question here, and this one I think is great, because they're saying we don't sell anything online. So basically, they're a nonprofit organization, and they're asking, can I still use pop-up forms to grow my list? And how do I do that? And so, Savannah, I know you work with customers all the time that are in similar situations, so you have a lot of insights here.
Yeah, everyone thinks e-commerce or, retail is the number one for pop-ups, but they can really be used across all industries. I think a great example for nonprofits is leveraging those getting interest about people, right? So they're clearly interested in your organization, but let's see how they want to be involved with your organization. Do they want to volunteer? Do they just want to stay in the know? Do they want to donate? Do they even want to join the team? Like there's some people who are so passionate and want to actually join the team. So that's where you can start leveraging, capturing those preferences, those quick questions in your pop-up form to learn more about who is joining your list. And then you can use segmentation to be like, okay, I have this whole segment of customers who are interested in volunteering. Now I know when I have upcoming volunteer events, I can automatically send to those people because they told me that they were interested in that. So don't shy away from pop-ups. If you're not an e-commerce brand, they can be used across all industries.
Amazing. Todd, go for it.
Oh, I was just going to say you can use that micro yes strategy for any industry because it's taking this small steps, uh, approaches of learning about their preferences, learning about their interests, and using that micro yes works in any industry.
Amazing. I'm going to do two more questions. We are coming up on time here. And these are both a little bit specific to the tech. So I have a question coming in. Can I use pop-up forms on multiple websites? So that's a great kind of push there. How does that work?
Yeah, so we have customers they're running multiple sites all within one Mailchimp account. And the good thing is that you can connect, as I was just saying earlier, connect each of those websites to your Mailchimp account, and then you can have pop-ups across, let's say you have 3 websites, you can have them across all 3. And then even a step further, you can have multiple pop-ups on each of those websites. So you really have the flexibility to do as many as you want across all of the sites that you manage in your Mailchimp account.
Amazing. We love flexibility, right? Especially when there's so many nuances to the strategy. The tool needs to serve that. And then this is going to be our final question for today. I'll throw it to you, Savannah, but Todd, if you have any ideas, would love to hear your thoughts as well. We've alluded to this a few times, both in the presentation, but also in Q&A, talking about A/B testing or even multivariant testing, right? So how do you recommend we go about testing our pop-ups to understand what's working and what isn't working?
Yeah, I had said, you can't set it and forget it. We really need to continue to optimize these. My rule of thumb is always checking in at that 2-week mark. However, every business is different, right? So if you're not seeing really clear winners after that 2 weeks, let it go for a month. Every business is different, but check in at that 2 weeks. At minimum, testing it once per quarter, I would say is, where you should start. But yeah, every 2 weeks, if you're changing up little things, you'll start to understand what customers on your website are really resonating with. And I'm talking even down to like the button color. Like if you can really just like narrow in on small little things, they can really drive a huge impact.
Yeah, that's great. All right. Well, we really appreciate so many great questions. So thanks to everybody in our audience here today. Some really great engagement. I think if there's one thing to take away from this research, it's that opt-in success isn't necessarily about doing more. In fact, it's about doing the right things at the right time and being really strategic and testing and learning. Savannah is just one of many people on a larger team that are just filled with expertise, and they're here to support marketers like you on your opt-in strategy, your email strategy. So if you're interested in having a conversation with an expert, use the QR code that is on the screen right now, and you could book a conversation to get started and learn more. Thank you again for joining us today, and we hope today's conversation and the insights that were shared gave you a few ideas that you could put into practice right away.